What if history wasn't written but reflected? Picture an empire so captivated by its own grandeur that it abandoned the written word entirely, choosing instead to etch its legacy into the shimmering surfaces of countless mirrors. This wasn't just vanity, it was a calculated reinvention of reality itself. Across palaces and temples, polished metal and glass became the chosen medium for recording triumphs, erasing defeats, and bending the past to serve the present. No scribes, no scrolls, just an endless hall of reflections, each one a carefully crafted illusion. Welcome to the story of the empire that didn't write its history, it mirrored it. At first glance, the idea seems almost poetic, a civilization so enamored with beauty and symbolism that it turned its back on traditional records. But dig deeper, and you'll uncover something far more intriguing. Mirrors weren't just decorative, they were deliberate. Imagine walking through a throne room where every wall, every corridor, told a version of events tailored to flatter the ruler of the hour. Battles lost could vanish with a tilt of the glass. Rebellions quashed might appear as glorious victories with the right play of light. This was history as performance art, where the line between truth and illusion blurred with every reflection. Why go to such lengths? Because in a world where perception is power, controlling the narrative, literally shaping how subjects saw their own past, was the ultimate act of control. And yet, the mirrors held secrets even their creators couldn't fully suppress. Hidden in their distortions, their carefully angled omissions, lies a trail of clues modern historians are only beginning to decipher. What happens when an empire tries to erase its mistakes but leaves behind fragments of the truth in the very tools it used to hide them? That's the mystery we're unraveling today. From the artisans who crafted these deceptive masterpieces to the rulers who relied on them, we'll trace how a society's obsession with image reshaped its destiny, and how, centuries later, we're still piecing together the reality behind the reflections. This isn't just a tale of ancient propaganda, it's a lesson in how power, art, and human nature collide. So let's step into the gallery of mirrors together and discover what the empire didn't want you to see. Long before this empire cast its reflection across the lands, mirrors were objects of wonder, rare, shimmering portals that seemed to hold the very essence of magic. In a world where polished bronze and silver were luxuries few could afford, the rulers of this fledgling kingdom stumbled upon a secret: artisans who could craft mirrors with unparalleled clarity. While other societies recorded their histories on fragile papyrus or heavy stone tablets, this empire saw something deeper in those reflective surfaces. To them, a mirror wasn't just a tool, it was a bridge between the mortal and divine, a surface that could capture not just faces but fate itself. Their rise to power was as calculated as the angles of their mirrors. By controlling the production and distribution of these prized objects, they wielded influence far beyond their borders. Neighboring kingdoms clamored for their technology, trading gold, soldiers, even sovereignty for a glimpse of that otherworldly craftsmanship. But the empire's true innovation wasn't just in making mirrors, it was in mastering their symbolism. In their hands, a mirror became the perfect metaphor for governance. It could reveal or distort, illuminate or obscure, depending on who held it. Early court decrees were etched not on parchment, but along the gilded frames of ceremonial mirrors, ensuring every proclamation carried the weight of something sacred. What began as a practical advantage soon became a cultural obsession. Mirrors lined the halls of their temples, positioned to catch the sunrise during solstice ceremonies, as if channeling the gods' approval. Warriors carried small polished discs into battle, believing they could deflect not just arrows but misfortune. and when a ruler died, their finest mirror was shattered, not in grief, but to fragment their legacy into countless pieces, each shard distributed to loyal subjects as a tangible piece of history. This wasn't mere superstition. It was the birth of a new kind of record-keeping, one where truth was as malleable as molten glass. Yet the most revealing detail lies in what they chose not to reflect. Surviving fragments show meticulous care in what images appeared and what angles were avoided. A mirror placed at the entrance of a palace might glorify a military campaign, while one hidden in a private chamber could soften a ruler's flaws with strategic shadows. The empire didn't just record events, it curated them, crafting a past that served the present. And as their power grew, so did their most audacious experiment, rewriting history not by destroying records, but by controlling every reflection of it. The stage was set for a revolution in how power shapes memory, one polished surface at a time. The earliest surviving mirror chronicles are masterpieces of deception, not just in what they show, but in how they show it. Take the famed Falcon Mirror, discovered in the ruins of a royal treasury. At first glance, it depicts a coronation scene, a young ruler kneeling before priests as sunlight streams through temple windows. But tilt the artifact just slightly and the image shifts. The same figures now stand on a battlefield, their hands gripping weapons instead of scepters. This wasn't artistic whimsy, it was deliberate duality. Historians believe each mirror contained at least 3 layers of narrative: the official version for public display, a secondary scene visible only at certain angles for elite viewers, and hidden details etched so finely they'd only catch light during specific celestial events like solstices or eclipses. Controlling these layered messages required astonishing technical skill. Artisans mixed silver and mercury in precise ratios to create reflective surfaces with varying opacity, while master engravers worked upside down and backward to carve scenes that would align correctly when viewed through the glass. The most prized mirrors weren't just objects, they were illusions engineered to respond to their environment. Some reacted to candlelight differently than sunlight, changing their stories day to night. Others, like the controversial serpent mirror now housed in the Grand Archives, appear blank until warmed by human touch, revealing scenes of court intrigue only when held by hands at body temperature. This wasn't mere record-keeping, it was history as an interactive performance. But who decided which versions survived? The answer lies in the Empire's Mirror Guild, an elite class of artisans and scholars who reported directly to the throne. Each commissioned mirror underwent rigorous inspection not for quality, but for compliance. Surviving guild ledgers detail how certain angles were mandated to display flattering perspectives, while forbidden views were deliberately distorted. One remarkable entry describes a mirror celebrating a naval victory that was ordered destroyed because its alternate angle accidentally revealed sinking ships on the horizon. The Guild's true power wasn't in crafting reflections, but in curating reality itself. Perhaps most telling are the mirrors that didn't survive. Excavations at imperial border forts show evidence of systematic mirror destruction, not by invaders, but by the Empire's own soldiers during retreats. These weren't acts of vandalism, but of calculated memory control. A single intact mirror captured by enemies could expose multiple contradictory versions of events, undermining decades of carefully constructed narratives. Today, historians piece together the Empire's true story, not from the pristine mirrors displayed in temples, but from the damaged ones buried in trash pits or hidden in peasant homes' accidental archives, where the Empire's carefully polished facade finally cracks to reveal glimpses of unvarnished truth. The Empire's rulers understood something profound about human nature: what people see, they believe. And if you control what they see, you control what they believe. This wasn't just about vanity or artistry. It was psychological warfare waged with polished glass and cunning angles. Take the Great Processional Mirror, a towering slab of silvered bronze that once dominated the central square of the capital. On feast days, crowds would gather as priests tilted it to catch the sun, projecting scenes of imperial triumph onto nearby walls. The effect was breathtaking, golden light transforming into marching armies, soaring temples, bountiful harvests, all reflections carefully engineered to omit drought, rebellion, or defeat. Citizens didn't just witness history, they experienced it as a dazzling spectacle, making the state's version of events feel divinely ordained. But the real genius lay in the mirror's adaptability. Unlike static stone carvings or fragile scrolls, these reflective surfaces could be subtly altered over time. A mirror commemorating a military campaign might initially show soldiers standing victorious over a fallen enemy. Yet after years of unrest, the same mirror could be discreetly re-angled to soften the scene, perhaps framing the enemy not as slain, but as kneeling in submission. The facts didn't change, the reflection did. This allowed the empire to retrofit its history without ever admitting error. Archaeologists have found temple mirrors with faint scratch marks around certain figures, evidence of later adjustments where disgraced officials were literally scrubbed from the record. Public spaces became theaters of manipulated perception. In the Hall of Ancestors, a curved wall of interlocking mirrors created an infinite regress of the ruling dynasty's likenesses, visually reinforcing their eternal legitimacy. Step too close, however, and the angles distorted visitors' own reflections, making them appear small and insignificant beside the towering images of emperors. Even the empire's currency played this game. Coins bore miniature mirror motifs that, when held at precise angles, revealed hidden symbols of loyalty. The message was clear. From grand temples to everyday transactions, reality was what the empire reflected back to you. How did ordinary people navigate this hall of smoke and mirrors? Diaries recovered from merchant archives suggest many citizens developed a keen skepticism. Some wrote of holding personal truth mirrors, small, crudely polished discs kept in their homes to compare against official displays. Others traded rumors about whispering mirrors in back alleys, where certain angles allegedly revealed censored scenes. But dissent was dangerous. The punishment for deliberately cracking a state mirror equaled that for treason, a stark reminder that challenging the empire's narrative meant shattering the very fabric of its power. The most chilling revelation comes from recent spectral imaging of a noblewoman's burial mirror. While its surface shows her presiding over a lavish banquet, hidden layers depict the same feast with half the attendees absent, likely purged in one of the dynasty's many silent coups. This duality captures the empire's essence, a society where every reflection held secrets, and the greatest skill wasn't seeing, but knowing when to look away. Behind every carefully angled mirror stood figures even more enigmatic than the reflections themselves, the mirror priests. Cloaked in silver-threaded robes and sworn to lifelong secrecy, these elite custodians weren't just artisans or historians, they were the empire's memory architects. Their training began in childhood, with apprentices selected for their uncanny ability to perceive minute distortions in reflective surfaces. One surviving initiation text describes the final test. Candidates had to recite a story while viewing it in a mirror, then retell it backward from the reflection's perspective. Only those who could seamlessly alternate between truth and illusion earned the right to handle the sacred mirrors. Their most guarded skill was the turning ceremony, a ritual performed whenever the empire needed its history adjusted. Under the guise of lunar alignments or solar events, priests would gather in torchlit chambers to recalibrate key mirrors. Using polished copper rods and liquid mercury, they'd alter the angle of a mirror by fractions of a degree, just enough to shift a military defeat into a strategic withdrawal or a famine into a period of pious sacrifice. Witness accounts smuggled out by defectors describe how the priests chanted in a mirrored chorus, their voices reflecting off surfaces until the very air seemed to vibrate with rewritten history. But were they historians or propagandists? The answer lies in their dual titles. Publicly, they were keepers of eternal light, revered for preserving the empire's glory. Yet internal scrolls address them as masters of necessary shadows, hinting at their darker role. A recovered priest's journal from the empire's twilight years reveals the psychological toll. One entry describes polishing a mirror to erase an entire rebellion, only to notice his own reflection growing fainter with each alteration. Their downfall came from an unexpected source, their own perfectionism. As the empire declined, priests struggled to maintain coherent narratives across thousands of mirrors. A provincial governor's report complains of citizens comparing temple mirrors and noticing inconsistencies in battle scenes. The priest's greatest fear wasn't invasion, but collective disbelief. In the end, their meticulously crafted reflections couldn't hide the cracks spreading through the empire's foundation, proving that even the most carefully constructed illusions shatter when reality pushes back. The Great Mirror Hall stood as the empire's beating heart, a cavernous vault where history didn't just live but shimmered. Stretching the length of 5 royal chariots end to end, its walls were lined with thousands of polished surfaces, each one a frozen moment in time. But these weren't mere decorations. They were meticulously arranged in a precise grid, their angles calibrated so that sunlight streaming through the ceiling's crystal apertures would animate the entire hall at noon. Walk its length, and you'd witness the empire's past unfold like a plague, conquests glowing gold, ceremonies gleaming silver, every reflection curated to flow seamlessly into the next. This wasn't just an archive, it was history choreographed. Only the empire's most trusted could enter freely. Mirror priests moved through the hall like living clockwork, their gloved hands adjusting frames by hair's breadths to maintain the official narrative. Ambassadors granted rare access were led along predetermined paths where mirrors tilted to showcase only flattering angles. Rebellions became peaceful transitions of power, military blunders transformed into tactical masterstrokes. Even the floor played its part. Black marble tiles embedded with crushed obsidian created the illusion of walking on a starless night sky, reinforcing the sense that visitors stood between heaven and earth, witnessing truths too grand for ordinary record-keeping. But the hall's true genius lay in its defenses. Hidden between the mirrors were narrow slits where armed guards could observe every visitor's reaction. Those who lingered too long at certain reflections or worse, tried to tilt a mirror themselves, were swiftly removed. Records speak of a provincial governor who dared to point out discrepancies between a battle scene in the hall and his own wartime memories. The next day, his likeness appeared in a new mirror, kneeling in submission to the emperor. The message was clear: challenge the reflection, and you'd become part of its revised narrative. Beneath this spectacle lurked an even darker secret. Recent excavations beneath the hall revealed a second, subterranean level dubbed the Shadow Gallery by archaeologists. Here, mirrors deemed unfit for the light were stored, their scenes depicting everything the empire wished to erase. Some show rulers in moments of weakness, others capture famines or plague years. Most chilling are the ones with deliberately distorted perspectives, like the infamous Weeping Mirror, whose surface warps any figure standing before it into a grotesque, crying silhouette. These weren't accidents, they were tools of psychological torment. Defeated rivals forced to view themselves in these mirrors would see their very identity twisted before being executed, their final moments literally erased from their own reflection. Yet for all its control, the hall couldn't suppress every truth. Scratches found on certain mirrors' backs reveal coded markings by brave artisans' tiny rebellions in the form of dates or names, etched where only future restorers might find them. One particularly defiant example shows a battle scene's alternate angles scratched into the silver backing itself, invisible from the front but legible when held to a lamp. These hidden acts of preservation hint at a quiet resistance, proof that even in an empire obsessed with controlling light, shadows could still speak. The War of Reflections began not with a battle cry, but with a single cracked mirror in the imperial treasury. When a high priest discovered fissures radiating through a ceremonial mirror depicting the emperor's coronation, the fractures revealed something unexpected, a hidden layer showing armed guards dragging the previous ruler from the throne. This accidental glimpse of suppressed truth ignited a decade-long struggle where mirrors became weapons, and history itself was the battlefield. Two factions emerged: the traditionalist mirror priests, who upheld the empire's polished narratives, and the reformists, a breakaway sect of artisans who began crafting truth mirrors with unflinching scenes of famine, revolt, and court intrigue. For ordinary citizens, the conflict played out in startling ways. Market squares became arenas of competing narratives, with rival factions setting up mirrors side by side. One might show the empire's armies victorious in a border skirmish, while its neighbor depicted the same soldiers retreating under enemy fire. The effect was disorienting. A single event splintered into countless reflections, each claiming to be the real version. Red riots erupted when reformist mirrors in the grain districts displayed stockpiled harvests during a famine, contradicting the priests' images of barren fields. People began carrying personal witness mirrors, small discs they'd hold up to compare official scenes with their own memories, creating a grassroots movement of historical verification. The empire's response escalated from propaganda to purge. Imperial decrees mandated that all mirrors undergo light purification, a process where reformist-aligned artisans were forced to melt down and recast their works under priestly supervision. But the reformists retaliated with ingenious subterfuge. They crafted mirrors with heat-sensitive alloys. Scenes of imperial grandeur would dominate in daylight, but when warmed by torchlight at secret night gatherings, hidden truths would emerge. One surviving example, the Phoenix Mirror, appears to show a royal wedding until candlelight reveals the bride slipping poison into the groom's cup. Archaeological evidence reveals how deeply this war reshaped the empire's psyche. Excavated trash pits contain thousands of mirror fragments. Many deliberately shattered along scene divides, half a triumphant general's face forever separated from the other half, showing his corpse. This physical act of breaking mirrors became a silent protest, with citizens symbolically fracturing the empire's carefully constructed reality. Even the priesthood fractured. Dissident priests developed a coded language of mirror placements, angling sacred mirrors during festivals to cast shadows that spelled out forbidden truths on temple walls. The conflict's turning point came during the infamous Moonlit Reckoning, when reformists hijacked the empire's grandest propaganda tool, the annual Light Festival. As thousands gathered to watch the mirror hall's noon spectacle, conspirators had secretly adjusted key mirrors. Instead of the usual parade of imperial glory, reflections showed starving villages adjacent to overflowing royal granaries, battlefields littered with imperial casualties, even the emperor's own spies caught bribing foreign envoys. The effect was catastrophic. Witness accounts described nobles fainting, priests scrambling to cover mirrors with their robes, and the emperor himself reportedly shattering the hall's central mirror with his scepter in rage. In the aftermath, the empire faced an impossible choice: double down on control or adapt. They chose both. a new class of harmony mirrors emerged, blending selective truths with flattering illusions, showing famine relief efforts while omitting the droughts caused by imperial mismanagement, or depicting pardoned rebels without acknowledging their grievances. This uneasy compromise held the empire together for another generation, but the damage was done. The War of Reflections had proven that once people learned to question mirrors, they began questioning everything. The empire's greatest fear, a populace that could see through its illusions, had come to pass, setting the stage for a decline no amount of polished silver could disguise. The empire's downfall didn't come with a single shattering blow, but with a slow, creeping realization mirrors could lie, but they couldn't stop time. As neighboring kingdoms grew wary of their deceptive diplomacy, and droughts withered crops that once fed their artisans, the empire's reliance on reflections became its greatest vulnerability. Invaders from the north carried not just swords, but something far more dangerous: polished obsidian discs that reflected the empire's own mirrors back at themselves. When held at opposing angles, these shatterstones exposed inconsistencies in official scenes. Warriors who appeared victorious in one mirror stood defeated in another. Banquet tables laden with food in palace halls showed empty plates when viewed from a different perspective. The effect was like holding a mirror to a mirror, revealing an infinite regression of contradictions the empire could no longer explain away. Internal dissent followed. A scribe's smuggled diary describes the moment a group of disillusioned priests staged their final act of defiance. During the Festival of Renewal, they subtly tilted the great hall's central mirrors to align with the rising sun, projecting hidden scenes of rebellion onto the temple walls. For the first time in generations, citizens saw uncensored history burning villages, executed dissenters, the emperor's spies moving through crowds like shadows. The aftermath was swift and brutal, but the damage was irreversible. Once people glimpsed the seams in the empire's crafted reality, they began questioning every reflection. Market stalls sold puzzle mirrors, broken shards reassembled to create jarring, disjointed narratives. Parents whispered to children that truth lived in the cracks between official stories. When the invading armies finally breached the capital, they found priests desperately smashing mirrors rather than let them fall into enemy hands. But in their haste, they overlooked the empire's greatest irony. The very act of destruction preserved what they sought to erase. Shattered fragments, buried in rubble or carried off as loot, often retained single, unaltered scenes, frozen moments too small to curate. A broken edge might show a general's genuine grief at a soldier's death, untouched by later propaganda. A palm-sized shard from a temple mirror preserved the only known image of a queen's coronation before priests altered it to diminish her role. These accidental artifacts became the empire's truest historians. Yet some reflections proved disturbingly resilient. Conquering rulers, dazzled by the mirror technology, repurposed them for their own propaganda, often keeping the same artisans to craft new illusions. The famous sunset mirror, which once showed the empire's golden age, was recut to glorify its conquerors, its original scene surviving only as faint ghosts beneath the new engravings. Other mirrors were melted down, their silver reworked into coins stamped with the faces of new kings, a bitter echo of the empire's belief that history could always be remade. The lesson lingers like a reflection in a darkened room. When a society builds its identity on controlled narratives, it grows brittle. The empire's mirrors, for all their artistry, were ultimately fragile, unlike stone carvings or clay tablets that endure even when empires fall. Their tragedy wasn't just the loss of their stories, but the realization that no amount of polish could preserve a version of history that refused to acknowledge its own cracks. Today, archaeologists piece together the empire's legacy not from its grandest illusions, but from the fragments it failed to completely control proof that truth, however distorted, always finds a way to reflect back. Centuries after the empire's collapse, its mirrors still whisper secrets to those who know how to listen. Modern archaeologists wielding spectral imaging and three-dimensional scanning technology have become the new mirror priests, not crafting illusions but dismantling them. The real breakthrough came when researchers realized these artifacts weren't just reflective surfaces but layered time capsules. Using polarized light microscopy, they discovered that many mirrors contained up to 7 separate engraving layers, each corresponding to different historical revisions. Like peeling an onion made of silver and mercury, scientists can now isolate individual narrative strata, watching as a single mirror's story evolves from brutal honesty to polished propaganda across generations. Some of the most startling revelations come from the so-called palimpsest mirrors unearthed near the old capital's ruins. These battered artifacts show clear evidence of being scraped down and re-engraved multiple times. But modern reflectance transformation imaging can detect tool marks from previous scenes buried microns beneath the surface. One such mirror, catalogued as Reflection Artifact 73, initially appeared to depict a standard harvest festival, but when analyzed with multi-spectral imaging, its deeper layers revealed a far darker story. The same celebratory crowd originally appeared as rioters, with the baskets of grain they held in the final version first carved as torches and weapons. The empire didn't just revise history, it performed full-scale theatrical rewrites on the same stage. Perhaps no discovery has rewritten our understanding more than the mirror fragments from the Eastern Garrison dig site. Pieced together like a high-stakes jigsaw puzzle, these shards form what researchers call the Battle of Two Dawns sequence. Official mirrors in the capital showed this military engagement as a glorious victory, but the garrison fragments hidden beneath floorboards by a dissenting officer tell a different tale. Using photogrammetry to digitally reconstruct the angles, historians realized these battlefield mirrors were positioned to catch both the rising sun and the smoke of burning villages. The resulting reflections didn't glorify the empire's might. They documented its atrocities with careful engravings that made the smoke form screaming faces in the morning light. These weren't tools of deception but of silent witness. The most unexpected twist came from an unassuming shard no larger than a coin, discovered in a peasant's grave far from the capital. At first glance, its scratched surface seemed insignificant until researchers at the Institute of Archaeological Optics noticed something peculiar. When subjected to X-ray fluorescence, the mirror's backing showed traces of organic material. Further analysis revealed it contained pollen grains from flowers that only bloom during lunar eclipses. This tiny fragment, it turns out, was part of an elaborate celestial calendar system, with different flowers corresponding to specific astronomical events. The empire hadn't just manipulated human history, they'd attempted to reframe cosmic phenomena as divine endorsements of their rule. A surviving priest's ledger confirms this, describing how certain mirrors were angled to catch the moon's tears during eclipses, creating the illusion that celestial bodies wept golden light upon imperial ceremonies. What emerges from these discoveries is a portrait of an empire constantly at war with reality itself. Each technological advancement in mirror analysis peels back another layer of their grand illusion, not to diminish their achievements, but to finally see them clearly. The true genius of these artifacts lies not in their deception, but in their unintended honesty. However much the empire tried to control every reflection, the mirrors preserved the marks of their making. The hesitation cuts where scenes were altered, the faint outlines of erased figures, the microscopic wear patterns showing which angles were viewed most frequently. In their obsession with crafting the perfect reflection, they left us something far more valuable, a record of their fingerprints on history's mirror, smudges and all. The mirrors didn't just reflect, they spoke. Hidden beneath their shimmering surfaces lay a sophisticated visual language, one where every curve, color shift, and play of light carried layers of meaning. Modern researchers call it the mirror code, a complex system of symbols and angles that functioned like a silent dialect. Imagine standing before one of these artifacts, seeing not just your own face, but a carefully orchestrated message woven into the reflections, political proverbs disguised as sunlight patterns, military orders concealed in the way shadows fell across engraved borders. This wasn't mere decoration, it was a full-fledged communication network etched in silver and shadow. Deciphering this code has become a multidisciplinary puzzle. Materials scientists analyzing the alloys discovered that specific mercury to silver ratios altered how light refracted, creating intentional, bright zones that drew the eye to certain details while leaving others in purposeful obscurity. Art historians noticed recurring motifs. A falcon in flight might symbolize an impending military campaign when its wings caught the light at dawn, but the same bird tilted toward sunset could signal a period of mourning. Even the frames held meaning. Interlocking geometric patterns on one recovered mirror matched lunar cycles, suggesting its reflections were meant to be viewed only during specific moon phases for maximum symbolic impact. The breakthrough came when linguists cross-referenced fragmentary priestly texts with surviving mirrors. A previously indecipherable manuscript, when held near a particular mirror under ultraviolet light, revealed ink that fluoresced in sync with engravings on the glass, proving the Empire had created a literal key to their visual language. One such pairing showed how a seemingly random scattering of stars on a mirror's edge aligned with coded instructions for tax collection when viewed through a prismatic lens. The Empire hadn't just written history in reflections, they'd built an entire administrative system around light and perception, yet some symbols resist interpretation. The infamous crimson threshold mirrors, named for their peculiar red-tinged reflections during equinoxes, depict scenes that change hue based on temperature. At room temperature, they show peaceful temple rituals, but when warmed, the figures' robes darken to blood red, their postures shifting into what might be sacrifice or execution. Archaeologists debate whether this was meant to commemorate actual events or serve as a warning about the consequences of disobedience. Even more enigmatic are the whisper mirrors, ultra-thin discs that vibrate at specific frequencies when struck by sunlight at precise angles, producing tones some researchers believe coordinated military movements across vast distances. What makes the mirror code truly revolutionary is its adaptability. Unlike static written languages, these reflections could convey different messages to different viewers. A merchant might see a mirror in the marketplace displaying prosperous trade routes, while a literate priest viewing the same artifact from 2 steps to the left would discern warnings about upcoming shortages. This multi-layered communication system allowed the Empire to maintain order without universal literacy, a technological marvel that doubled as a tool of social control. The lingering question isn't just how they achieved this, but why they chose mirrors over simpler methods. The answer may lie in their belief system. Surviving fragments of the doctrine of flawed sight suggest the Empire considered direct written records untrustworthy, too easily altered or destroyed. But a mirror, they believed, captured the world as it wished to be seen, blending truth and perception into something more malleable than fact, yet more persuasive than fiction. In their eyes, every reflection was a negotiation between reality and desire, making mirrors the perfect medium for a civilization that viewed history not as fixed but as endlessly negotiable. Recent advances in spectral imaging have uncovered what might be the code's Rosetta Stone, a priest's training mirror excavated near the old Capitol, its edges lined with minuscule annotations matching symbols to their meanings. Early translations reveal shocking sophistication. Some light patterns functioned as visual puns, where the reflection of a spear held at a certain angle transformed into a sheaf of grain, signaling that military garrisons should switch to peacetime farming. Others show meticulous planning, entire campaign strategies communicated through the interplay of engraved clouds and sunlight on parade shields. But for all we've decoded, gaps remain. The deepest layers of the mirror code may have been reserved for initiates alone, their meanings deliberately obscured by techniques modern science hasn't yet reconstructed. Some researchers speculate the empire's collapse wasn't just political, but linguistic, that as the priesthood fragmented, so did their ability to maintain this fragile visual language. The mirrors still hold their secrets close, revealing just enough to remind us how much we've yet to learn about an empire that spoke in light and remembered in reflections. The empire's mirrors and our smartphone screens might be separated by centuries, but they share a startling kinship. Both bend reality to fit the stories we want to believe. Think about it, those ancient artisans polishing silver to glorify their rulers weren't so different from today's algorithms curating our social media feeds, where every war has competing footage, every protest exists in alternate angles, and even personal memories get filtered through lenses of selective nostalgia. The mirrors didn't just distort images, they weaponized perspective, much like how a single cropped photo or deceptively edited clip can rewrite public understanding overnight. Take the empire's Falcon mirror, with its layered narratives shifting based on the viewer's angle. Doesn't that echo our own experience scrolling through polarized news coverage of the same event? One channel's heroic liberation is another's brutal invasion, depending on which version catches the light of our pre-existing beliefs. The empire's priests controlled access to mirrors just as platform algorithms gatekeep visibility, boosting some truths to viral prominence while shadow banning others into obscurity. And when they smudged unwanted figures from their reflections, were they really so far removed from airbrushing disgraced officials from group photos or deep-faking a politician's gaffe into non-existence? Yet there's a crucial difference. The empire's mirrors required painstaking craftsmanship. Each deception demanded skilled hands and precious materials. Today, anyone with a free app can warp reality in seconds. A medieval artisan might spend weeks engraving a single flattering angle of a battle. Now, AI tools generate convincing alternate histories faster than fact-checkers can debunk them. The empire's illusions were confined to palace walls, while ours spread globally at the speed of Wi-Fi. When that noblewoman's burial mirror showed two versions of her banquet, one crowded, one half empty, it was a guarded secret. Today, such contradictions would trend simultaneously under competing hashtags, leaving audiences to choose their own truth like sides in a cafeteria. The real danger isn't just that history becomes malleable, but that we stop expecting it to hold still. The empire's citizens grew suspicious when mirrors contradicted their lived experience. They carried personal, truth mirrors as reality checks. But in our digital hall of mirrors, where filters alter faces and synthetic voices recite scripted lies, even first-hand footage feels suspect. We've normalized the idea that every image has an undo button, that archives can be rewritten with a keystroke. At least the empire acknowledged their manipulations as statecraft. Today, we disguise ours as entertainment, calling deepfake parodies harmless fun until they sway elections. Perhaps the most haunting parallel is how both societies grappled with the exhaustion of perpetual doubt. Scroll through comments under any controversial video, and you'll find the same weary refrain. we'll never know what really happened. That's the echo of an empire where citizens, bombarded by conflicting reflections, finally threw up their hands and asked, "What's the use of seeking truth when it changes with the light?" The mirrors didn't just alter history, they bred nihilism, a precursor to our own age of apathy where misinformation thrives not because people believe it, but because they've stopped believing anything can be truly known. But here's where our story diverges from the empires. Their mirrors were finite, their distortions traceable by modern imaging tools. Our digital revisions spawn endlessly, leaving no originals to compare against. A shattered ancient mirror preserved its hidden layers. A deleted tweet vanishes into the void. Yet we have one advantage they lacked. Their mirrors were controlled by priests and kings, while ours, for now, still rest in the hands of ordinary people who can demand transparency, question sources, and preserve uncut footage alongside the edits. The empire fell when its citizens saw through the glass. Our test is whether we'll look past our screens before it's too late. While the Mirror Empire saw its reflections as the pinnacle of historical record-keeping, neighboring civilizations watched with a mix of fascination and horror. The philosopher Anaximander of Lydia, writing in the 7th century before the Common Era, left us the most scathing critique. They do not write history, they stage it like actors polishing their masks between scenes. His scrolls describe visiting the empire's grand mirror halls and realizing with chilling clarity that every reflection had been angled to eliminate shadows, creating a world where light had no counterbalance. Yet not all outsiders condemn the practice. The merchant scholar Zhai Yuo, whose travel logs were preserved in the Jade archives, argued the mirrors represented an advanced form of wisdom. Why chain truth to unchangeable stone when it breathes like the wind? Their history lives as all things should. This philosophical divide centered on two irreconcilable views of memory. The Stoic schools beyond the empire's borders insisted truth must be fixed, carved in stone or inked on parchment, to serve as an unchanging measure of justice. But the empire's defenders, like the court philosopher Lysandra, countered that all history is perspective. When two warriors clash, does the victor's song dishonor the fallen, or simply sing a different truth? She famously demonstrated this by placing 3 mirrors around a single vase. Each reflection showed distinct patterns depending on the angle, yet all were undeniably real. The implication was clear: insisting on one official version might be the greater deception. Yet the critics spotted a fatal flaw in this reasoning. The poet-historian Naram Sin of Akkad observed that while multiple perspectives could coexist, the empire allowed only those reflections blessed by the priests to catch the light. In one surviving tablet, he recounts how imperial envoys arrived with mirrors depicting their latest conquest, but when local scholars tilted them to see alternate angles, guards swiftly intervened. This wasn't pluralism, it was illusion masquerading as nuance. The distinction still echoes in modern debates about media ecosystems that claim to offer all sides, while algorithmically amplifying some views into dominance. What made these ancient arguments so prescient was their grasp of memory's relationship to power. The desert nomads of the Azure Crescent, who preserved history through oral storytelling, saw the mirrors as something far darker than deception. Their elder councils warned that altering the past didn't just change what people believed, it changed how they believed. When every reflection could be adjusted, memory itself became untrustworthy, leaving citizens adrift in a perpetual present where only the state could define reality. We recognize this today in the way gaslighting erodes personal autonomy, or how constant revisions to official statements breed collective uncertainty. The most poignant critique came from an unexpected source: children's tales. Folktales from the empire's frontier regions often featured the mirror that remembered, a mythical artifact retaining all erased versions of history beneath its surface. In one haunting story, a peasant girl melts down a discarded palace mirror to make a cooking pot, only to find her stew bubbling with forgotten battles and banned laments. These narratives suggest ordinary people understood the cost of malleable history long before modern psychologists documented how manipulated memories reshape identity. Today, as we digitize archives and edit photos with a tap, the philosopher's warnings take on new urgency. The empire's mirrors proved that when truth becomes a game of angles, the most dangerous lies aren't the blatant fabrications. They're the selective illuminations, the artful omissions that let us see only what flatters our present power structures. Perhaps the final irony is this: we now study their mirrors not to learn what they showed, but to examine what they chose to hide. In the end, the reflections they banished to darkness tell us more about their world than all the gleaming surfaces they polished for posterity. Long after the empire's mirrors gathered dust, their legacy shimmered in the fireside tales of neighboring lands not as history but as warning. The nomadic herders of the eastern steppes told of a hungry mirror that stole faces, each reflection leaving the viewer a little less recognizable until they vanished entirely. Coastal fishermen whispered about phantom lights dancing on the waves, ghosts of imperial mirrors that had slipped from sinking ships, still trying to cast their manufactured glory onto the restless sea. These weren't just stories, they were cultural antibodies, folkloric defenses against an ideology that had weaponized perception itself. One recurring motif paints mirrors as prisons for the dishonored dead. In a particularly chilling ballad from the mountain tribes, a disgraced imperial general is condemned not to execution, but to eternity inside a mirror, forced to reenact his falsified victories while the real victims of his campaigns press silently against the glass from the other side. The tale takes on deeper meaning when you realize these cultures lacked glass-making technology. Their descriptions of soul mirrors precisely match the empire's mercury-backed silver discs. Clearly, someone had glimpsed these artifacts and understood their power to trap narratives as well as images. More intriguing are the soothsayer traditions that emerged along trade routes. Certain oracle cults began using polished obsidian instead of water for scrying, claiming it revealed the lies clinging to the truth like tarnish to silver. One surviving prophecy from the Temple of Broken Sights describes an age when all mirrors would shatter simultaneously, and men would bleed from their eyes as they beheld reality unmasked, a likely metaphor for the empire's collapse. What's remarkable is how these mystical practices inverted the empire's own mirror symbolism. Where imperial priests used reflections to manufacture certainty, the oracles wielded them to expose uncomfortable truths. Children's games from the period show how deeply the mirror metaphor permeated everyday life. Archaeologists have found clay dolls in border villages with removable mirrored faces, one side beautifully polished, the other scratched and cloudy. Accompanying nursery rhymes describe little girls deciding which face to wear before approaching authority figures, a stark commentary on the empire's two-tiered reality. Even playthings became tools for teaching generations to navigate a world where appearance dictated survival. The most poignant legends center on the empire's discarded mirrors. A widely circulated folktale tells of a village that melted down a broken imperial mirror to forge plowshares, only to have their crops grow in twisted shapes that mimicked the erased engravings. Another speaks of a healer who used mirror shards to stitch wounded soldiers, inadvertently making their scars reflect battle scenes they'd never fought. These stories articulate a profound anxiety that the empire's manipulated past could infect the very soil and flesh of those who inherited its ruins. Perhaps no legend captures outsider perceptions better than the Weaver's Mirror parable, In it, a blind tapestry maker receives a gift from imperial envoys, a mirror framed with a village's history. Though she cannot see, she runs her fingers along the glass and immediately recognizes the falsehoods by their unnatural smoothness. The truth has texture, she declares before smashing the mirror and weaving its fragments into a hanging that shows both the official story and the cracks between. This simple fable distills centuries of resistance into one radical idea: that the empire's greatest weakness wasn't its lies, but its inability to imagine people might value rough honesty over polished fiction. These myths did more than critique, they preserved alternative histories. The Song of the 37 Broken Queens, passed down by bards in the Southern Isles, names every female ruler the mirrors erased, describing their reigns in verse too rhythmically infectious to suppress. Shadow puppet theaters in desert caravans staged the plays that couldn't be reflected, dramatizing rebellions and reforms absent from official records. Even the empire's own dissidents adopted these outsider storytelling methods. Archaeologists recently discovered a smuggled letter written in lemon juice between two mirror artisans, declaring they'd hidden the real chronicles where light never touches in the stories mothers tell at dusk. What emerges from this folkloric tapestry is a counter-narrative as meticulously crafted as the empire's mirrors. Where the official reflections showed endless victory and harmony, the legends whispered of cost and consequence. A cursed mirror that showed conquerors their future graves wasn't just supernatural fiction. It was a way for conquered peoples to assert that no amount of silver could polish away mortality. The phantom reflections that supposedly haunted imperial descendants weren't ghosts, but accountability made manifest. These stories became the cracks the empire couldn't seal, the angles it couldn't control, proving that while mirrors might bend reality, collective memory has a way of snapping back with terrible force. The empire's mirror artisans guarded their craft like alchemists hoarding the secret of turning base metal into gold. Their workshops, hidden behind labyrinthine palace corridors, were temples of precision where ordinary materials underwent near magical transformations. Start with the metal itself, not just any alloy would do. Surviving guild ledgers describe a proprietary blend called sun bronze, a shimmering amalgam of copper, arsenic, and meteoritic iron that caught light differently depending on the hour. Modern metallurgists attempting to recreate it hit an impasse. The exact ratios remain unknown, but more perplexing are the traces of organic compounds found in the alloy tree resins and bee venom that somehow altered the metal's reflective properties when heated. One theory suggests these additives created microscopic prisms within the bronze, bending light before it even reached the polished surface. Then came the true sorcery, the mercury amalgamation process. Unlike simpler mirrors of the era that used polished metal alone, the empire's craftsmen developed a way to coat their sun bronze with liquid mercury suspended in egg whites. Applied in 7 thin layers, one for each day of their creation myth, this mercurial veil gave the mirrors their signature depth, making reflections appear to hover slightly above the surface. But the real genius lay in how they manipulated this coating. Temple frescoes show priests using lodestones to steer the mercury into delicate patterns before it set, creating intentional distortions that would highlight or obscure elements depending on the viewer's position. A warrior's triumphant stance might blur into a defensive posture when seen from the left, or a bountiful harvest scene could morph into ration lines when viewed by torchlight. The engraving techniques defy modern explanation. Using tools finer than surgical needles, artisans carved scenes not into the mirror's surface, but between the layers of mercury and metal. X-rays of intact mirrors reveal a staggering discovery. Some images weren't etched at all, but grown through controlled tarnishing. By applying vinegar-soaked cloths to specific areas, they encouraged the metal to darken in precise shapes, creating shadows that moved as the mirror aged. A coronation scene might gradually reveal hidden mourners in the background as the years passed, or a painted battlefield's casualties would multiply with each decade's tarnish. This wasn't just artistry, it was temporal engineering, history rewritten by chemistry itself. Light manipulation reached its zenith in the empire's grand ceremonial mirrors, monolithic slabs of silvered stone weighing as much as chariots. These weren't passive reflectors but optical computers of sorts. Mounted on gimbals adjusted by hidden counterweights, they could track the sun like primitive heliostats. During the festival of the double sun, priests would align them to project celestial reflections, carefully angled beams that made it appear as though two suns crossed the sky, a phenomenon interpreted as divine favor. Modern physicists calculating these alignments made an eerie discovery. The mirror's angles correspond not just to solar events, but to specific stars in the Orion constellation, suggesting the empire encoded astronomical knowledge into their propaganda. Yet the most haunting mystery surrounds the so-called breathing mirrors. Several court poems describe mirrors that subtly changed their scenes with shifts in atmospheric pressure. An approaching storm might make engraved ships appear to sail faster, or an impending eclipse could darken only the faces of disgraced officials in a crowd scene. When archaeologists recently discovered a sealed workshop in the western provinces, they found glass vessels labeled Storm Breath and Drought Sigh, likely early barometric liquids used to treat mirror surfaces. But the key ingredient, referred to in scrolls as the sigh of the earth, remains unidentified. Was it a mineral, a gas, or something more unsettling? The sole surviving recipe warns, only those who have walked the obsidian roads may gather it, and even they return changed. What truly died with the empire's last mirror makers wasn't just technique, but an entire philosophy of perception. Their craft acknowledged what modern science now confirms, that light and memory are both particulate and wave, that observation alters the observed. In their hands, mirrors became paradox machines, devices that didn't just record history but interrogated it. The closest modern equivalent might be holography, yet even our most advanced lasers can't replicate the emotional resonance of standing before a 2,000-year-old mirror and watching a long-dead artisan's carefully calculated distortions make your own reflection momentarily resemble a forgotten emperor. Perhaps that was the final secret, not how they made the mirrors, but how the mirrors, in turn, remade everyone who gazed into them. Not all historians see the empire's mirrors as tools of deception. Some argue we've been looking at them from the wrong angle entirely. A growing school of thought suggests these artifacts weren't propaganda at all, but sacred objects designed to commune with the divine. Professor Ilara Voss's controversial temple light hypothesis posits that the mirrors functioned as celestial conduits, their precise angles and metallic compositions calibrated not to distort reality, but to capture specific wavelengths of sunlight during solstices and equinoxes. Under this theory, what we interpreted as alternate scenes might actually be ritual diagrams mapping the path of the sun god across the heavens, the famous falcon mirror's shifting imagery. Not historical revisionism, but a liturgical calendar, its layers marking sacred hours when priests believed the veil between worlds grew thin. Even more radical is the claim that these mirrors were ancient scientific instruments. Dr. Rojan Mehta's team at the Institute of Archaeoptics recently demonstrated how certain mirror arrays could predict solar eclipses with startling accuracy. When arranged in specific formations, their overlapping reflections create shadow patterns that align with lunar nodes. a discovery suggesting the empire might have mastered celestial mechanics centuries before the telescopes of Galileo. This would explain why so many mirrors were found buried in precise geometric patterns, their surfaces etched with what we mistook for battle scenes but could actually be star charts. The serpent mirror that reveals images only at body temperature, possibly an early thermoscope, its mercury amalgam expanding to track fevers during plague seasons. Then there's the psychological interpretation gaining traction among cognitive archaeologists. Dr. Lian Zhao's neural imaging studies reveal that prolonged exposure to the mirror's layered reflections produces measurable changes in brain activity, specifically in areas associated with meditation and creative problem solving. This has led some to theorize the artifacts were tools for consciousness expansion. They're carefully engineered distortions meant to induce trance states. The empire's so-called deceptions might have been deliberate paradoxes designed to break linear thinking, much like Zen koans. When a priest tilted a mirror to show conflicting versions of the same event, was it manipulation or a spiritual exercise teaching adherents to hold multiple truths simultaneously? These alternative theories force us to reconsider the empire's entire legacy. If the mirrors were sacred objects, their destruction takes on new horror, not just the erasure of history, but the silencing of prayers. If they were scientific instruments, their loss set back optical physics by a millennium. Yet even these generous interpretations can't fully explain why the empire guarded mirror technology so fiercely, or why they systematically altered scenes that clearly depicted political events. Perhaps the truth lies in between, that the mirrors served all these purposes at once, their genius being how they blurred the lines between science, spirituality, and statecraft. After all, what is power if not the ability to make people believe your light shows are divine, your calculations are prophecy, and your carefully curated reality is the only one worth reflecting? The voices of the empire's survivors hum beneath the polished surface of official history like whispers through cracked glass. For generations, descendants of weavers, farmers, and potkeepers passed down stories that clashed with the mirror records, not in grand proclamations, but in lullabies, harvest chants, and the coded language of textile patterns. A fisherman's ballad from the coastal villages describes watching imperial ships return from a glorious victory with hulls full of dead soldiers, their faces covered by mirrored shields that reflected the sky instead of their lifeless eyes. Another tale, preserved in the Not language of mountain shepherds, tells of a bride who recognized her missing brother in the background of a palace mirror, his image hastily scratched out but still visible when she tilted her head just so. These weren't just folk memories, they were acts of quiet rebellion, stitching truth into the fabric of everyday life. Archaeologists working with modern descendants have uncovered astonishing consistencies between these oral accounts. 3 separate family lineages, one from the northern mines, another from the southern orchards, and a third from eastern fishing communities, all describe a solar eclipse that the mirror records attribute to divine favor. But the oral versions agree on chilling details: how the emperor's astronomers had predicted the event, then used it to stage a miracle, directing priests to angle temple mirrors and create the illusion of the sun splitting in two. The stories diverge only in their endings, where northern tellers speak of rebellious astronomers executed for revealing the trick. Southern versions claim they escaped to teach people how to read the sky behind the mirrors. The most poignant contradictions emerge from women's traditions. While imperial mirrors showed serene priestesses tending eternal flames, spindle songs passed down through matriarchal lines recount strikes among temple workers protesting unsafe mercury exposure. One particularly haunting weaving pattern, still reproduced in remote villages, encodes the symptoms of mirror makers' palsy, tremors, and madness caused by handling liquid mercury without protection. These textiles, often dismissed as decorative, turn out to be meticulous records. The number of threads in a border corresponds to dead artisans. The dye colors indicate which workshops suffered worst. Unlike the mirror's static scenes, these cloth documents grew with each generation, their patterns expanding to accommodate new names. Reconciling these narratives isn't about choosing sides, but understanding how power shaped memory. The mirror's present history as a series of frozen moments carefully composed and framed. The oral traditions flow like rivers, carrying sediment from countless tributaries. A child's rhyme about the king who blinked wrong and disappeared might reference an actual purge, but also serve as a warning about the dangers of dissent. Fireplace tales of the Hunger Winters contradict official harvest scenes, yet tree ring data from the region confirms periods of drought matching the storyteller's timelines. Modern technology is bridging these worlds. Linguists using spectral analysis have detected mercury residue in the very scrolls that record the empire's triumphs, likely transferred from scribes' hands after polishing mirrors. Meanwhile, anthropologists working with descendant communities employ 3D modeling to recreate the lost angles described in oral histories. One breakthrough project combined ancestral memory with laser scanning to identify a hidden chamber in a ruined temple, precisely where folktales claimed dissident priests had stored uncensored records. The chamber was empty, but its walls bore scrape marks matching descriptions of the truth mirrors that were allegedly smuggled out before the empire's fall. What emerges isn't a tidy resolution, but a richer tapestry. The mirrors show us what the empire wanted to believe about itself. The oral histories reveal what it couldn't admit. Like sunlight fractured through a prism, neither version contains the whole truth, but together they illuminate the spaces between reflection and reality. Perhaps that's the most valuable lesson, that history isn't found in any single record, but in the tension between competing memories, each one polishing the other until something closer to truth shines through. Digging through the empire's shattered mirrors forces archaeologists to confront an uncomfortable question. Are we reconstructing history or creating new myths? The fragments we unearth are palimpsests of intention, each scratch, each altered angle, a deliberate act of curation by long-dead hands. When modern conservators painstakingly reassemble these artifacts, they're not just piecing together broken glass, but stepping into the role of the empire's own mirror priests, deciding which version of reality gets preserved. Take the controversial restoration of the so-called sunburst mirror in the National Museum. Its central panel clearly depicts a royal procession, but the edges contain faint traces of figures that were scraped away centuries ago. Should conservators use laser imaging to resurrect these erased courtiers, knowing the empire deliberately removed them? Or does fixing the mirror violate the historical record by obscuring the fact that censorship was part of the story? This dilemma becomes even thornier with chemically altered mirrors. Advanced spectral analysis can now detect mercury residues that reveal where scenes were modified over time. But when historians use this data to digitally reconstruct original versions before the edits, are they recovering truth or committing a kind of temporal vandalism? The empire's artisans didn't just layer images, they engineered reflections to evolve. A battle scene intentionally darkened with vinegar treatments wasn't merely censored, it was time-coded to reveal different details as the metal tarnished. By stripping away these deliberate chemical interventions, do we lose the artifact's most revealing dimension, its testament to how the empire weaponized time itself? The debate spills into museum displays. Some institutions arrange fragments to show multiple angles simultaneously, letting visitors toggle between official and hidden scenes with polarized light filters. Others argue this turns history into a choose-your-own adventure, undermining the empire's central lesson about controlled narratives. The Temple Mirror collection in Vienna takes a radical approach, displaying deliberately incomplete reconstructions with gaps labeled unknown, forcing viewers to sit with absence. Their curator famously quipped, "Sometimes the most honest thing a mirror can show us is its own cracks." Indigenous collaborators have introduced another perspective. Descendants of the empire's conquered peoples argue that Western museums obsess over optical accuracy while ignoring living traditions that preserved alternative histories. A coalition of mountain weavers recently created textile counter-mirrors, fabrics woven with metallic threads that recreate lost scenes from oral histories. Unlike fragile glass, these textiles are meant to fray and fade, embodying their philosophy that some truths must be continually renewed to stay alive. Their project asks, why privilege the empire's frozen reflections over the adaptive memory of those who survived it? Perhaps the most profound ethical challenge lies in what we choose to reflect upon at all. For every mirror painstakingly restored, thousands remain in storage, not due to lack of resources, but because their narratives don't fit modern historical frameworks. A cache of domestic mirrors found in a servant's quarter, showing children playing near the palace gates, was initially dismissed as unremarkable until a junior researcher noticed the toys were shaped like executed rebels. Now we must ask whose stories get the light. The empire built its legacy by deciding what deserved reflection. As we excavate their ruins, we risk repeating their sins of selection, just with different biases. The real test isn't whether we can reconstruct their mirrors, but whether we can bear to see our own reflections in their broken glass. The empire of mirrors refuses to stay buried in the sands of history. It keeps resurfacing in our stories, its gleaming deception refracting through modern imaginations. Fantasy novels paint it as a cautionary tale of vanity, like in The Gilded Maze, where an enchanted mirror city lures travelers with visions of their greatest desires, only to trap them in endless reflections of their own flaws. Video games adapt its themes more literally. The indie puzzle sensation Lumen Mirage tasks players with tilting mirrors to reveal hidden truths about a collapsing empire, each level modeled after real archaeological finds. Even children's animations aren't immune. The villainous Queen of Shardbound wields a fragmented mirror that rewrites memories, her palace walls lined with surfaces that lie. Hollywood can't resist the empire's visual spectacle. The blockbuster Empire of Reflections dressed its actors in mercury-coated costumes that shifted colors with movement, mimicking the empire's famed light-bending mirrors. But where the film leaned into grandeur, the cult horror The Angle of Repose took a subtler approach. Its antagonist, a descendant of mirror priests, manipulates victims by altering their reflections until they no longer recognize themselves, a chilling metaphor for how the empire weaponized identity. These adaptations share one insight: the mirrors were never just tools. They're the perfect metaphor for our age of curated realities, where truth bends depending on who holds the camera. Literature digs deeper into the psychological fallout. Speculative fiction like The Truth Beneath the Silver imagines a scholar slowly going mad as she uncovers layers of mirror engravings, each revision eroding her trust in recorded history. Meanwhile, historical romances set in the empire often use mirrors as romantic devices, lovers communicating through angled reflections, their messages invisible to the surveilling priesthood. The best works understand that the empire's true horror wasn't its illusions, but how willingly its people participated in them. A standout example is the graphic novel Broken Light, where a lowly mirror polisher realizes she's complicit in erasing her own father's rebellion from history, her polishing cloth literally wiping him from existence. Game designers exploit the Empire's legacy for both aesthetics and mechanics. The strategy game Mirrorbound forces players to balance military conquest with propaganda, allocating resources to craft victory mirrors that keep discontent at bay. In contrast, the narrative-driven echoes of the Obsidian Hall makes players solve puzzles by aligning shattered mirrors, each fragment offering conflicting accounts of key events. The most innovative interpretation might be Lux in Tenebris, an ARG that uses smartphone cameras to overlay mirror filters on real-world locations, forcing players to confront how easily their own surroundings could be digitally altered. Why does this ancient empire resonate now? Because its mirrors hold up a disquieting reflection of our digital age. Their layered truths anticipate our deepfake anxieties. Their angled narratives preview our algorithmically tailored news feeds. When a character in the glass chronicle declares, "History is just the reflection that survives," she might as well be commenting on viral misinformation. The Empire fascinates not because it's alien, but because it's familiar. A distorted mirror showing us how easily we, too, might trade truth for flattering illusions. Modern storytellers return to it like artisans reworking an ancient alloy, each adaptation hammering the old metal into new shapes, but always revealing the same warning beneath the polish: beware the civilization that mistakes reflection for reality. Even music channels the Empire's aesthetic. The avant-garde ensemble Mirror Psalms performs with custom-built instruments that project laser reflections in sync with ancient tuning systems recovered from mirror engravings. Their dissonant harmonies recreate what historians believe the Empire's shadow melodies might have sounded like songs only visible as light patterns on vibrating mercury surfaces. Meanwhile, fashion designers drape models in prismatic fabrics that mimic the Empire's light-bending textiles, sending mirrored runways shimmering with half-truths. The Empire's legacy endures because it offers artists the ultimate creative paradox, a medium that reveals even as it obscures, a story that changes depending on where you stand. The most profound adaptations, however, aren't the ones that replicate the mirrors, but those that replicate their absence. A haunting installation at the Modern History Museum displays an empty frame labeled, "What the Empire Didn't Reflect," its glass replaced by a void that captures viewers' silhouettes as they peer in. Nearby, a participatory exhibit invites visitors to scribble suppressed truths on the backs of mirrored tiles, where only others can read them. These works grasp the Empire's core tension, that every polished surface hides a counter-narrative, every reflection conceals a shadow. Whether as warning or wonder, the mirrors keep finding new eyes to reflect, proving that some histories refuse to stay fixed, no matter how carefully you angle the glass. The Mirror Empire's legacy forces us to confront an unsettling truth: there's no such thing as a perfect historical record, only competing interpretations vying for dominance. Their gleaming surfaces remind us that every account, whether etched in glass or penned on parchment, passes through the filter of human perspective. Consider how modern archives function. Official documents get preserved while marginal notes fade, photographs are cropped for impact, and even digital records face selective deletion. We're not so far removed from those ancient priests angling mirrors to catch the most flattering light. We just use different tools to shape the narrative. What sets us apart is our awareness of this fragility. When archaeologists study the Empire's mirrors, they don't just analyze the images, they examine the scratches where scenes were altered, the mercury residues suggesting later revisions, the faint ghost impressions beneath the final polish. This forensic approach holds a lesson for contemporary historians. Truth often lies in the edits themselves. A president's redacted memo tells us as much about power as its unaltered contents would. A social media post's deletion history reveals more about cultural values than the post itself. The Mirror Empire teaches us to read between the lines, but also to scrutinize the very hands that drew them. Yet striving for objectivity doesn't mean pretending bias doesn't exist, it means mapping its contours. Take the Empire's famous harvest mirror, which showed overflowing grain baskets. Agricultural logs from the same period, recently deciphered from clay tablets hidden in a cellar, reveal those baskets were half empty during a drought. The dissonance between image and reality isn't a flaw to lament. It's a vital data point. Modern historians similarly cross-reference satellite images with government crop reports, compare eyewitness testimonies with forensic evidence, layer data streams to reveal what any single source might obscure. The goal isn't some unattainable perfect truth, but a multidimensional understanding that acknowledges all records, like all mirrors, have blind spots. Perhaps the Empire's most valuable lesson is about the weight of preservation. Their mirrors required constant polishing to maintain their illusions, while the unofficial truth survived in folk songs and children's games that needed no such upkeep. Today, digital archives demand similar vigilance. Rot erases sources faster than papyrus decays. File formats become unreadable, and platform algorithms decide what content gets visibility. But parallel preservation thrives in unexpected places. Activists archiving censored websites, grandmothers recounting family histories resistant to official narratives, even meme culture repurposing old images to challenge new orthodoxies. The Empire's downfall came when people stopped believing their reflections. Ours might come if we forget that every record, no matter how polished, is just one angle on a much larger story. The mirrors ultimately challenge us to become better listeners across time. When we encounter conflicting accounts, whether in ancient glass or modern news feeds, we can emulate the artisans who secretly scratch truths behind their mirrors. Not by claiming neutral ground, but by making our biases visible, annotating sources, acknowledging gaps, and leaving space for future corrections. After all, the most honest reflection the Empire ever produced might be those shattered fragments archaeologists now piece together, broken, incomplete, but finally telling their full story through the very cracks meant to silence them. The mirrors of this empire weren't just polished metal. They were feats of optical engineering that bent light like storytellers bend the truth. To understand their magic, you have to picture how light behaves when it hits a surface at different angles. A modern mirror reflects a straightforward image, but the Empire's artisans mastered something far more sophisticated: layered reflections that changed depending on the viewer's position. By engraving scenes at varying depths in the metal and coating them with precise mercury amalgams, they created surfaces that acted like primitive lenticular lenses. Step to the left and a victorious army might appear to march. Tilt your head right and those same figures could seem to retreat. This wasn't just artistry, it was physics weaponized for propaganda. Modern researchers using laser interferometry have reconstructed how these effects worked. The Empire's mirrors employed microscopic ridges and grooves, each one calculated to scatter light in specific directions. Some were even engineered with varying thicknesses of mercury coating, causing light to refract differently across the surface. The result: a single mirror could display multiple scenes by exploiting the same principles behind today's holograms. The famous chameleon mirror from the Imperial Treasury, for example, shows a coronation when viewed straight on, but tilting it just 15 degrees reveals faint outlines of the previous ruler's execution in the background. This level of precision suggests an understanding of light's wave properties centuries ahead of their time, knowledge that should have been impossible without telescopes or spectrometers. What's even more startling is how they harnessed natural light as part of the illusion. Archaeoptics specialists have discovered that certain mirrors were designed to interact with celestial events. The so-called solstice mirror, found in the Temple of Dawn, contains a hidden layer of crystalline inclusions that only align during the summer solstice, projecting a hidden image of the sun god onto the temple floor. Others, like the storm mirror recovered from a coastal garrison, use copper filaments to darken scenes when exposed to the charged air preceding thunderstorms, a primitive form of weather-responsive art. These weren't static objects, they were dynamic interfaces between human craft and natural phenomena. The real debate among scientists isn't whether the Empire understood optics, but how they achieved such precision without modern tools. Some theorize they used water-filled glass spheres as primitive lenses to study light refraction. Others point to their advanced metallurgy. The Empire's mirrors contain trace amounts of rare earth metals that subtly alter reflectivity. A controversial study even suggests they might have had access to volcanic glass lenses, now lost to time, that allowed them to observe microscopic engravings. What's undeniable is that they treated light itself as a medium to be sculpted, bending not just rays but perception. Yet for all their technical brilliance, the mirror's greatest innovation might have been psychological. Researchers at the University of Cambridge recently demonstrated how the brain processes these layered reflections differently than flat images. The slight delays between seeing alternate scenes trigger a mild dissociative state viewers report, feeling like they're glimpsing secret truths rather than being fed propaganda. The Empire didn't just engineer light, they engineered the experience of discovery itself, making their subjects feel like active participants in uncovering hidden narratives. This delicate dance between art and science, between optics and neurology, is what makes their mirrors not just historical curiosities, but masterpieces of applied perception, one where every angle tells a new story and every reflection holds a calculated revelation. While the Empire obsessed over polished reflections, their greatest rivals, the Kingdom of the Spoken Dawn, built their legacy on something far more ephemeral: breath and memory. Nestled in the rugged highlands beyond the Mirror Empire's reach, this civilization rejected metal and glass entirely, entrusting history to living voices instead. Where the Empire crafted scenes in silver, the Dawn people wove theirs in song, their chronicles passing from one generation to the next through rhythmic epics sung at firelight gatherings. The contrast couldn't have been starker. One culture froze time in mercury-backed illusions, while the other let stories flow like mountain streams, reshaping with each telling yet carrying the same essential truths downstream. Archaeologists discovered the depth of this rivalry in a remarkable find: a buried diplomatic pouch containing a shattered imperial mirror wrapped in Dawn Kingdom parchment. The mirror showed an emperor receiving tribute from kneeling highlanders, but the accompanying parchment told a different tale. Written in berry ink that still stains modern fingers, it recounts how Dawn ambassadors mocked the gift. They trade sunlight for shadows, thinking metal remembers better than flesh. This wasn't just cultural disdain, it was a philosophical declaration of war between two visions of truth. The Empire believed history must be controlled to endure, while the Dawn people argued it must be freed to survive. Their storytelling traditions reveal ingenious methods of preservation. Dawn historians, called voice keepers, trained from childhood in memory palaces far more sophisticated than mere repetition. Each historical event was anchored to sensory cues, The smell of cedar smoke for treaties, the taste of salted meat for battles, the cadence of loom beats for economic shifts. Modern neuroscientists confirm this approach's brilliance. Associating information with multiple senses creates neural pathways far more durable than engraved metal. A Dawn elder could recite 3 centuries of trade agreements without error, yet adjust details to clarify context, something the Empire's static mirrors could never achieve. The real test came during the Empire's invasion attempts. Military scrolls describe Dawn warriors deliberately shattering captured mirrors and scattering the fragments along mountain trails as truth traps. When Imperial scouts saw their own reflections fractured across 100 surfaces, each showing conflicting scenes from different campaign mirrors, the effect was reportedly paralyzing. Meanwhile, Dawn runners carried updated battle songs to every village within hours, ensuring their people heard of losses and victories alike. The Empire's polished lies couldn't compete with the visceral immediacy of a mother singing how her son died holding a mountain pass, her voice cracking on the same syllable in every retelling. Yet the Dawn Kingdom's greatest resilience lay in its acceptance of imperfection. Where the Empire's mirrors became brittle prisons for a single official narrative, Dawn storytellers embraced what they called the necessary drift, the way stories naturally evolve to serve new generations. A harvest song from 7 centuries ago might now include metaphors about climate change, but its core warning about overfarming remains intact. This flexibility allowed their history to stay relevant, while the Empire's mirrors grew increasingly disconnected from the lived experiences of their own people. The ultimate irony, the Empire's obsession with permanence may have doomed its legacy. Linguists recently reconstructed a Dawn epic from 12 scattered village versions, piecing together accounts of the Empire's collapse that contradict official mirror records. One verse describes the last emperor staring into a shattered palace mirror, not at his own reflection, but at the faces of the rebels reflected in each broken piece, a poetic detail no artisan would have dared engrave. The mirrors aimed to stop time, but the songs flowed around them like water, wearing down even the brightest silver with the patience of centuries. Buried beneath layers of imperial propaganda lies a shadow history, one etched not in official mirrors, but in smuggled fragments hidden in pottery jars, brick hollows, and even coffins. These shards tell of a clandestine network of mirror makers who risked everything to preserve uncensored truths. Known only as the Glass Pact, these artisans allegedly crafted duplicates of every state-commissioned mirror, hiding the originals while sending altered versions back to the palace. Their greatest act of defiance, a set of so-called truth mirrors designed to reveal forbidden angles when heated by candlelight, a feature detectable only by those who knew where to look. Recent excavations near the old artisan quarters uncovered a workshop cellar filled with these illicit artifacts. One particularly damning fragment shows Emperor Kallax III not in his famed chariot victory, but being dragged from his horse by his own troops, a scene that would have meant instant execution if discovered. Even more telling are the tiny maker's marks scratched into the backs of these mirrors, not the official guild seals, but symbols resembling broken chains. Chemical analysis reveals another clue. These rebel mirrors used a different mercury alloy, one that tarnished less easily, as if the artisans wanted their hidden histories to outlast the Empire's polished lies. But were these mirror smugglers preservationists or saboteurs? Court records describe their activities as treason, accusing them of poisoning the wells of memory. Yet peasant ballads from the era praise mysterious glass saints who distributed small mirrors showing unfiltered scenes of famine and corruption. The truth likely lies somewhere between. Some artisans may have acted out of idealism, while others simply resented the priesthood's control over their craft. A few surviving personal letters, scratched onto thin copper sheets and hidden inside mirror frames, hint at more personal motives. One artisan writes of watching priests alter a scene depicting his brother's heroic death in battle, reducing him to a barely visible figure in the background. The letter ends with a chilling promise. They think light bends to their will. We will show them how it burns. The conspiracy's full impact becomes clear when examining the empire's final decades. As the rebellion spread, the consistency of state mirrors began to falter. A provincial governor's report complains of false reflections in temple displays mirrors that showed contradictory troop movements depending on the time of day. Scholars now believe this was deliberate sabotage, with glass-packed members subtly adjusting mirror angles during cleaning rituals to create confusion. The most dramatic evidence comes from the imperial treasury itself, where a recently catalogued accounting mirror used to track taxes bears faint engravings of a peasant revolt along its edges, visible only when dusted with powdered magnetite, a technique known only to senior artisans. What sealed the empire's fate wasn't just the existence of these truth mirrors, but their eventual discovery. During the infamous Moonlight Purge, priests conducting random inspections noticed discrepancies in mercury densities across mirror surfaces. Interrogation records describe how captured artisans were forced to reconstruct entire censored scenes from memory before execution, a grim irony that their life's work in preservation ended with their own voices becoming the final record. Yet the rebellion's legacy endured in unexpected ways. Fragments of these illicit mirrors circulated underground for generations, their hidden images giving rise to the folk saying, "A cracked mirror shows more faces, and every face has its truth." Modern laser scanning has revealed the rebellion's most ingenious tactic. Some mirrors were engineered to degrade predictably. A ceremonial mirror in the Grand Archives initially appeared merely aged until spectral imaging exposed its secret. The artisans had mixed honey into the mercury amalgam, causing gradual crystallization that would eventually reveal a buried scene of imperial assassinations. This wasn't just preservation, it was a time-delayed truth bomb set to detonate long after its creators' deaths. The empire sought to control history by freezing it in polished perfection, but the glass pact understood something more profound, that memory, like mercury, is fluid, and no surface can hold all its weight forever. The empire's fall didn't shatter its illusions, it scattered them, seeding fragments of its deceptive artistry across centuries of historical record-keeping. Long after their last mirror was melted down, the techniques they perfected lived on, repurposed by conquerors and kings who grasped the seductive power of malleable truth. Consider the Byzantine mosaic portraits where emperors' features were subtly altered with each regime change, or the Tudor painters who airbrushed disgraced courtiers from royal portraits with the same precision the empire's artisans applied to mercury-coated glass. These weren't just coincidental parallels, they were the direct descendants of a philosophy that treated history as raw material rather than sacred record. Archaeologists tracing this legacy made a chilling discovery in the archives of the early Renaissance. A previously overlooked manuscript from a Venetian glassmaker contained precise instructions for creating history mirrors that could display alternate scenes when heated, a technique identical to the empire's notorious truth-concealing artifacts. The client, a Medici prince seeking to document his lineage with appropriate flexibility. This wasn't isolated corruption. It was proof that the empire's greatest export wasn't its technology, but the seductive idea that power included the right to retrofit reality. Even the Catholic Church adopted modified versions of their methods, commissioning triptych altarpieces with layered panels that reveal different biblical scenes depending on the viewer's angle, divine narratives as adjustable as any imperial propaganda. The industrial age transformed rather than eliminated these distortions. Early newsreels of colonial expeditions often staged triumphant first contact scenes multiple times from flattering angles, editing them into seamless narratives of peaceful submission. Sound familiar? It's the Empire's solstice ceremonies reborn with celluloid instead of silvered bronze. 20th century dictators took the concept even further. Stalin's photo retouchers vanished disgraced comrades with the same ruthless efficiency as the mirror priest scraping traitors from palace walls. A surviving Nazi propaganda manual explicitly references the Empire's techniques, praising their dynamic historiography that allowed continuous improvement of the past. Modern digital culture has democratized these tools while magnifying their dangers. Social media filters that smooth imperfections echo the Empire's flattering palace mirrors, while deepfake technology achieves what their artisans could only dream of: real-time historical revision. But there's a crucial difference. Where the Empire's illusions required elite craftsmanship, today's distortions spread at the speed of a share button. Viral misinformation campaigns function like the Empire's light festivals gone rogue, with competing narratives refracting endlessly across platforms until even eyewitnesses doubt what they saw. The Empire spent generations perfecting the science of bending light. We've industrialized the process of bending truth, yet resistance persists in unexpected forms. Contemporary artists like AI embed QR codes in sculptures that reveal censored histories when scanned, a high-tech echo of the glass packs hidden engravings. Journalists are reviving oral history techniques from cultures that resisted the Empire, prioritizing lived experience over official records. Even Wikipedia's edit histories function as a kind of digital palimpsest, preserving successive versions like the layers of a tarnished mirror waiting to be cleaned. The Empire taught us that control over memory is the ultimate power, but its collapse proved that no reflection, no matter how artfully crafted, can withstand the weight of reality forever. The light always finds new angles. The next frontier in unraveling the Empire's mirrored lies not in shovels or brushes, but in beams of light thinner than spider silk. Imagine an archaeologist's toolkit where X-ray fluorescence scanners have given way to quantum holography machines that don't just image a mirror's surface, but reconstruct every molecular alteration made across centuries. Recent experiments with terahertz wave imaging at the Institute of Advanced Archaeological Sciences have already revealed erased engravings on fragments previously deemed blank, detecting disturbances in the metal's crystalline structure where artisans scraped away inconvenient truths. These ghostly traces, invisible to every other technology, emerge like whispers when bombarded with precisely tuned frequencies, exposing edits the Empire thought had vanished forever. But the real game changer lurks in the realm of artificial intelligence. Teams at Stanford and Cambridge are training neural networks on the Empire's surviving mirror fragments, teaching algorithms to predict missing scenes the way linguists reconstruct dead languages. By analyzing the Empire's established visual vocabulary, how certain battle formations always appeared from low angles, or how disgraced officials were consistently minimized in group scenes, these systems can generate probabilistic reconstructions of shattered artifacts. Early tests on deliberately damaged mirrors stunned researchers when the AI correctly inferred a missing panel's content based solely on the surrounding fragment's light-bending patterns. Some purists argue this veers into digital speculation, but proponents counter that it's no different than restoring a fresco from pigment traces just with photons instead of paint. Meanwhile, nanotechnology promises to solve one of mirror archaeology's oldest frustrations: mercury migration. Over centuries, the Empire's liquid mirror backings have oozed and crystallized, blurring once crisp engravings. Now, nanoparticulate stabilizers derived from volcanic glass can be injected into fragile mirrors, locking the mercury in place without disturbing its historic positioning. The process, dubbed frosting the past, allows conservators to freeze a mirror's current state while making hidden layers newly legible. At the Museum of Mediterranean Antiquities, this technique recently revealed a startling detail on a ceremonial mirror. A queen's coronation scene, long celebrated in imperial records, actually showed her younger brother holding the scepter in early versions. The implications are seismic. Even the Empire's most iconic moments may have been retroactively stolen from others. Perhaps the most poetic innovation comes from the field of archaeoptics. By recreating the Empire's mirror alloys and subjecting them to historically accurate light conditions, solstice angles, oil lamp spectra, even the particular blue of their dawn skies, researchers can finally experience these artifacts as their original viewers did. A joint German-Israeli project built a time-light chamber where mirrors are bombarded with photons matching ancient atmospheric conditions, revealing how scenes changed with the time of day or season. Their most haunting discovery: certain battle mirrors only showed casualties when viewed under the red-tinged light of sunset, suggesting the Empire ritualized grief by confining it to twilight hours. The ultimate goal isn't just better imaging, but decoding the Empire's full visual language. Linguists and computer scientists are collaborating on what they call the Mirror Rosetta Project, an attempt to catalog every recurring symbol, angle, and light interaction across all surviving fragments. Early patterns suggest the Empire employed a sophisticated grammar of distortion. Diagonal engravings often indicated uncertainty, while scenes that darkened under torchlight tended to depict events the state wished to downplay. One tantalizing lead comes from spectral analysis of the mercury itself. Trace impurities vary between mirrors of different eras, potentially offering a chemical timeline of when specific edits occurred. Yet for all these advancements, the most profound revelations may come from pairing cutting-edge tech with old-fashioned fieldwork. Last year, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar discovered a submerged workshop near the old capital's harbor, its floors littered with trial mirrors and discarded prototypes. These reject scenes deemed too truthful for official use, provide something no intact mirror ever could: a before and after snapshot of imperial censorship in action. One particularly telling fragment shows a naval battle with original annotations estimating casualties, later scrubbed and re-engraved as a training exercise. Such finds remind us that the Empire's greatest weakness wasn't their technology, but their hubris. They never imagined we'd develop tools to see through not just their mirrors, but their methods. As these threads converge, we stand on the brink of a new era in historical understanding. Soon, visitors to museums might hold augmented reality lenses over shattered fragments, watching as AI reconstructs missing scenes in real time. Digital archives could allow scholars to virtually tilt mirrors through every possible angle, mapping how propaganda shifted with perspective. And somewhere in a lab, a quantum computer hums, calculating the infinitesimal light paths needed to resurrect reflections thought lost forever. The Empire built its legacy on controlling light, but time has a way of bending all things, even their carefully crafted illusions, toward truth. Think about the last time you scrolled through your social media feed, each post a carefully crafted reflection of someone's life, polished to perfection. Now imagine an entire empire built on that same principle, where every post was a mirror angled to show only what the rulers wanted you to see, the unsettling truth. We might be closer to that ancient world than we'd like to admit. Just as the Empire's citizens walked through halls of manipulated light, we navigate digital corridors where algorithms tilt the mirrors of our perception, showing us versions of reality tailored to keep us engaged, outraged, or complacent. Consider how you consume news today. A single event fractures into countless narratives across platforms. One outlet's heroic stand is another's violent revolt, depending on which reflection you catch. The Empire's priests would nod in recognition. They understood that controlling the frame means controlling the story. When you watch a protest unfold through live streams shot from different angles, each with its own commentary overlay, you're essentially witnessing the modern equivalent of their Falcon mirror, where tilting your phone slightly left or right reveals entirely different truths. The tools have changed, but the game remains the same. Perspective is power. Even our personal memories aren't immune. How many of your childhood moments exist only as curated Instagram posts, filtered and cropped to fit a narrative? The Empire shattered mirrors to erase inconvenient histories. We archive old tweets or untag unflattering photos. Their artisans airbrushed defeated generals from battle scenes. We tap delete on embarrassing mistakes. The impulse to rewrite our pasts isn't new. We've just democratized the technology. A teenager editing acne from their selfie wields the same instinct as an emperor commissioning a more flattering coronation portrait, just with fewer consequences for failure. Yet there's a crucial difference. The Empire's mirrors were finite. They could smash or hide the artifacts they didn't like. Our digital hall of mirrors is infinite, self-replicating, and far harder to contain. A deleted tweet lives on in screenshots. A discredited deepfake video spawns 1,000 clones before fact-checkers can respond. The Empire at least had to employ skilled artisans to alter reality. Today, anyone with a smartphone can bend light and truth with equal ease. When a politician's gaffe can be erased with AI tools before it even trends, we've surpassed the Empire's wildest dreams of narrative control. This isn't just about technology, it's about how we choose to see. The Empire's subjects carried personal truth mirrors to compare against official propaganda. What's your equivalent? Do you cross-reference sources or settle for the reflection that aligns with your biases? When your feed shows a protest as either a righteous uprising or a violent mob, do you seek out the ground-level streams from bystanders or accept the version that fits your worldview? The real parallel lies in our willingness or refusal to question the angles we're shown. Here's where history offers hope. The Empire collapsed when people started comparing notes, when fragments of truth survived in folk songs and smuggled shards. Today, that same resistance thrives in encrypted chats, independent archivists, and citizens filming police brutality despite threats. Every time someone screenshots a deleted tweet, saves a vanishing story, or preserves a banned video, they're doing what the Empire's dissidents did, ensuring no single entity holds a monopoly on reality. The mirrors may be digital now, but our ability to crack them open and peer behind the glass remains. So the next time you double-tap a flawless travel photo or share a viral clip, ask yourself, what's outside this frame? Who benefits from this particular tilt of the mirror? And most importantly, what truths might be hiding just beyond the edge of the screen, waiting for someone to adjust the angle? The Empire taught us that polished surfaces often conceal fractures. Our challenge is to keep pressing against the glass until we see not just reflections, but the hands holding the mirrors. As we piece together the shattered remnants of the Mirror Empire's legacy, their reflections reveal something far more profound than ancient deception. They hold up a warning about the fragility of truth itself. Every cracked fragment we've examined whispers the same lesson. History is never a single story, but a mosaic of perspectives, each shaped by the hands that arrange them. The Empire didn't just distort reality, they weaponized the very act of seeing, turning perception into a tool of control. And yet, their greatest failure might be their most illuminating gift to us, proof that no narrative, no matter how artfully polished, can survive indefinitely without cracks. This isn't just a tale of ancient propaganda. It's a mirror for our own age, where algorithms curate our view of the world with the same precision as those mercury-coated surfaces. When you scroll through tailored news feeds or watch selectively edited footage, you're walking through a digital version of the Empire's Grand Hall, every angle calculated, every reflection filtered. The difference: we carry the equivalent of their truth mirrors in our pockets, the power to cross-reference sources, to seek out ground-level footage, to preserve vanishing tweets. These are our shards of resistance against modern illusions. What makes the Empire's story so compelling isn't their technological ingenuity, but the universal human struggle it exposes. Their citizens faced the same dilemma we do: how to reconcile official narratives with lived experience. The market vendors who compared temple mirrors to their own crude reflections, the soldiers who noticed discrepancies between battlefield realities and victory scenes, they grappled with cognitive dissonance, just as we do when confronted with conflicting accounts of current events. Their solution: whispering networks, hidden engravings, folk songs preserving banned truths, offers a blueprint for navigating our own age of information warfare. Let's not romanticize their downfall, though. The Empire didn't collapse because people suddenly valued truth. It fell because their illusions grew unsustainable. When famine struck, no amount of angled glass could make empty granaries appear full. When invaders came, no reflection could turn retreat into victory. Their mirrors worked brilliantly until reality pushed back with forces no amount of mercury could distort. That's the warning etched beneath their artistry. Systems built on selective visibility eventually crumble under the weight of what they've excluded. So what do we take from these fractured glimpses of the past? Not cynicism, but clarity. Just as archaeologists study the Empire's mirrors by examining their scratches and tarnish the unintended traces left by human hands, we too can train ourselves to look for the edits beneath the polished surface. When you encounter a news story, ask what's outside the frame. When you see a viral image, wonder about the angles not shown. The Empire's subjects had to risk their lives to share forbidden truths. We need only cultivate curiosity and courage to click beyond the first search result. If this journey through the Empire's Hall of Mirrors has resonated with you, consider this your invitation to join a much older conversation, one about who controls the reflections we call history. Drop a comment below sharing what surprised you most or which modern parallels struck you. And if you'd like to explore more stories where the past holds up a mirror to our present, don't forget to subscribe. After all, every new perspective adds another fragment to the mosaic, and the more angles we collect, the clearer the bigger picture becomes.